The room was dark, lit only by the cold glow of a computer screen. Lucas sat frozen, his fingers trembling over the keyboard. His face, usually smug behind a wall of code, had gone pale. On his monitor, line after line of documents spilled open: military records, therapy notes, handwritten letters. One in particular caught his eye. It was titled "To my late husband, thank you for still watching over me." He clicked it. As he read, something cracked inside him. Her name was Margaret. A 72-year-old widow. A disabled veteran. She had survived war zones, cancer, and the death of the only man she had ever loved. But it wasn't the trauma that made Lucas recoil, it was her hope. Her belief. Every word she wrote to Daniel, the fake persona he had used to lure her in, was soaked in a kind of love he hadn't seen in years. A kind of faith in humanity he had long abandoned. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the silence around him louder than ever. What have I done? His heartbeat thundered. The money was already in his account. The backdoor he'd installed in her computer had already harvested everything: bank passwords, private photos, medical files. There was no undo button. But what shook him most wasn't the data. It was the raw humanity he had just violated. In one of the files, she wrote, "You make me feel like I'm not invisible anymore." And now she was alone again. Completely. Lucas covered his mouth as the weight of it crashed down. This wasn't just another score. This was someone's life, someone's second chance at love, obliterated. But why did this scam, out of the dozens he had pulled, hit him like this? He shut the laptop with shaking hands, but it was too late. The damage was already done. And what he saw next would haunt him forever. Margaret didn't ask for much anymore. Each morning, she moved slowly through her modest home in a quiet Arizona neighborhood, her joints stiff from age and the old battlefield wounds that never fully healed. The sun streamed through thin curtains, catching dust in the air like tiny floating memories. Photos of a younger woman in uniform stood proudly on a shelf next to one of her late husband, James, smiling in his navy whites. That smile had once been her entire world. Now it was just a frame collecting dust. She still set 2 cups of coffee in the morning. One for her. One for James. No one called. No one visited. Her daughter lived 3 states away and had a life of her own. The neighbors were polite but distant. Technology had evolved faster than she could follow. And so, in the soft silence of her house, Margaret did what so many do when loneliness becomes too heavy: she went online, looking for a spark. Something. Someone. Across the country, in a cluttered apartment in Philadelphia, 24-year-old Lucas scrolled through fake profiles he used for scamming. He wasn't some dark web mastermind. Just another lost kid who got good at breaking into places he didn't belong, digital ones, mostly. He wore the same hoodie every day, headphones on, surrounded by empty energy drink cans and unpaid bills. To him, it wasn't personal. It was survival. His victims were just usernames with predictable passwords. But elderly people? They were the easiest. They answered kindly. They clicked without thinking. And most importantly, they believed. Margaret's profile had come through one of his data scraping bots, an old military support group thread, archived but accessible. She had posted once, months ago, "Does anyone else feel like the world forgot about us?" That was all Lucas needed. He built a profile. Daniel Taylor. 74, retired Navy pilot. Widowed. Loved dogs and jazz. Said all the right things. His profile photo, lifted from a stock image site, showed a man with kind eyes and a crooked smile. Within a day, Margaret responded. At first, she was cautious. A few words here and there. But Lucas knew how to play the game. He spoke softly. He listened, or at least pretended to. He told her she reminded him of his late wife. That her strength was admirable. That she deserved to feel seen again. Margaret's heart, long dormant, fluttered at the attention. She began checking her inbox each morning like it was Christmas. Her fingers would hover nervously over the keyboard before typing responses she hadn't shared with anyone in years. Lucas didn't care about the content. He watched the patterns. When her replies came faster. When her sentences got longer. When she started calling him Danny. He had her. But what Lucas didn't see, what the algorithms couldn't measure, was what Danny meant to Margaret. He was her light in a long hallway of darkness. She started brushing her hair again. Wearing lipstick. Rehearsing jokes before sending them in messages. The sadness in her voice, the one that lingered when she left voicemails for her daughter that went unanswered, began to lift. Meanwhile, Lucas was juggling 5 other marks. Money was coming in slow but steady. A few hundred here. 1,000 there. Margaret, though? She was special not for who she was, but for how much she trusted. How much she was willing to give without ever being asked. He marked her profile with a green tag on his dashboard, high emotional yield. Still, something about her was different. In her messages, she never complained. She always asked how he was doing first. And when he told her he had trouble sleeping, she sent him a playlist of old jazz tracks. Music helped me through the worst nights, she wrote. Lucas didn't listen. He just archived it. But that quiet decency, that kind of warmth, was something he hadn't felt in a long time. Margaret wasn't chasing romance. She was chasing connection. A simple need to matter to someone again. And unknowingly, she gave Lucas exactly what he had spent his life pretending not to need. Affection. Attention. Trust. 2 lives, decades and miles apart, colliding through a screen. Only one of them knew it wasn't real. Not yet. The messages started simple. How was your day, Danny? Did you eat something warm? Thinking of you tonight. Every night, like clockwork, Margaret would send a little note. Nothing dramatic. Nothing overbearing. Just gentle reminders that someone still cared. For Lucas, still hiding behind the mask of Daniel, those messages were signals. Green lights. Indicators that the hook was sinking deeper. He didn't even have to try that hard anymore. Margaret filled the space between them with kindness and curiosity. She asked about his favorite meals, his dreams, his memories of his wife. Lucas responded with carefully scripted stories. Some recycled from other scams. Others loosely based on his own fractured childhood, just enough truth to make the lies believable. But then, something strange began to happen. Lucas found himself reading her messages twice. Sometimes 3 times. He started delaying replies, not because he was disinterested, but because he wanted to say something better. Not just effective, but real. He'd never admit it, but he liked talking to her. Margaret would tell him about the garden she used to tend when her knees still worked. The tiny tomatoes she used to grow, how James, her real husband, would tease her for naming each plant. She talked about the books stacked on her bedside table, all of them half-read, waiting for someone to discuss them with. And she sent photos, old ones. Her in uniform. Her wedding day. Her and James at the beach in '82, both laughing, sun-drunk and happy. Lucas would stare at those photos longer than he should. He'd never known a love like that. Never even seen one up close. His parents had split before he could walk. Most of his relationships were transactional, short-lived, built on need or opportunity, not affection. But in Margaret's world, love was sacred. Earned. Gentle. Forgiving. And somehow, she was offering it to him. Every time he thought about pulling the plug, moving on to the next target, she'd send something that stopped him. A voice memo of her laughing at a story he made up. A scanned note in shaky handwriting, just thinking about you. A selfie with the caption, not bad for 72, right? He smiled more than he should have. For Margaret, those moments were everything. Her mornings had purpose again. She woke up excited to check her inbox. She made tea and set it across from her on the table, pretending Danny was sitting there with her. She turned on jazz at night, just like he said he liked, and danced slowly in her kitchen, alone but somehow not lonely. She began to write poetry again. Short, clumsy verses. She never shared them, but they lived in a journal now. A part of her she thought had died with James was breathing again. And it all started with a screen. Lucas started planting deeper emotional cues, testing how much she trusted him. He opened up about his fear of dying alone, about not being able to sleep, about the nightmares from his fake service in Vietnam. Margaret responded with grace and warmth. She told him about the night she woke up reaching for James. About the ache that never truly left. About how Danny made it feel, for the first time in years, like the ache might fade. Lucas read that line twice. Then again. He made the ache fade. It should have made him feel powerful. In control. But it didn't. It made him feel seen. Margaret asked if he'd be open to a video call. Lucas froze. He faked a hardware problem. Bad internet. The usual excuses. She didn't push, just sent him a photo of her holding a coffee mug that said hope is a stubborn thing. He saved it. The lines between his fake persona and his real self started to blur. He caught himself talking like Daniel with his roommates. He started listening to jazz. He even looked up Navy ranks so he could speak more convincingly, then kept reading, because the stories were fascinating. Margaret was teaching him things without even trying. But behind every sweet exchange was the lie. The silent ledger he kept. He knew her mother's maiden name now. Her dog's name. The street she grew up on. All the security question answers. He knew where she banked. What medications she used. Even her pension schedule. Everything he needed was within reach. Still, he hesitated. This wasn't like the others. This wasn't just a lonely woman with some savings. This was someone who trusted him with her whole heart. Someone who thought he was her second chance. And the worst part? A small part of him wished it was real. Margaret began calling him "my dear Danny" in her messages. She'd type it, then quickly follow with, "Sorry, that probably sounds silly." Lucas never corrected her. Instead, he responded, "It's not silly at all. I like it." And for the first time in a very long time, someone meant it. Even if only one of them knew the truth. It started with a small favor. Lucas, still playing the role of Daniel, waited until the time felt right. Margaret had been opening up for weeks, her messages longer, warmer, more trusting. She had shared stories she hadn't told anyone in years. And now, she signed every message with all my heart, Jem. So one evening, after a long exchange about the loneliness they both claimed to feel, Lucas dropped the bait. "My old Navy buddy just got diagnosed with stage 3 cancer," he wrote. "The VA is dragging its feet, and he's too proud to ask for help. I hate even bringing this up, but I'm scared for him." Margaret responded almost instantly. "Oh no, Danny. That's terrible. What can I do?" Lucas hesitated, not out of ethics, but something more inconvenient. Guilt. Still, the game was in motion. He'd done this dozens of times. "I hate asking you for anything," he typed, "but I'm trying to pull together enough for his first round of chemo. Just until the VA kicks in. I understand if you can't, really. I just didn't know who else to tell." Margaret didn't even blink. "Of course I can help. Tell me how much you need." Just like that. Lucas stared at the screen for a full minute, then typed in a modest amount, nothing too suspicious. A few hundred. He gave her a fake donation link, one that redirected to his crypto wallet. Within an hour, the money arrived. Margaret ended her message with, "Tell your friend he's in my prayers. And so are you." That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. He'd gotten exactly what he wanted, but the hollow in his chest wouldn't go away. He tried to justify it, she had plenty, her pension was steady, she lived modestly. But deep down, he knew he'd just taken from someone who truly believed she was helping a man she loved. Over the next few days, Margaret didn't mention the money again. Instead, she asked for updates. How was his friend doing? Was the hospital good to him? Did he need anything else? Lucas doubled down on the lie. He sent updates, made up treatment schedules, even thanked her for saving his friend's life. Margaret replied with prayers, emojis, and late-night voice memos of her humming old gospel tunes. The second ask came easier. A week later, Lucas told her he had to travel to visit his sick friend, but flights were outrageous. Margaret didn't hesitate. Another transfer. Another thank you. Another knot in Lucas's stomach. Soon, the requests became routine. Small, frequent, masked in emotion. Car troubles. A vet bill. A laptop replacement for his grandson. Each story crafted with care, each message wrapped in just enough vulnerability to avoid suspicion. And each time, Margaret gave. Because in her mind, this was love. This was what James would have done, stood by her, helped her when she needed it. She was simply doing the same. Giving not just money, but pieces of herself. Her time. Her trust. Her heart. Meanwhile, her checking account slowly thinned. Her daughter noticed first. "Mom, why is your rent payment late?" Margaret brushed it off. "Bank glitch," she said. Already fixed. She didn't want to lie. But what was she supposed to say? That she was helping a man who made her feel alive again? That she was finally happy? Because that was the truth. Despite the mounting withdrawals, the dwindling savings, and the unspoken fear in the back of her mind, Margaret felt happy. She hadn't smiled this much in years. Lucas watched the numbers rise in his dashboard. He was close to his target, just a few more transfers and he could disappear, block her, wipe the alias, and start again. But something strange was happening. He kept reading her messages even after the money came. He started opening her voice notes, listening to her talk about her day, her favorite movies, her plans for the garden she hadn't touched in 5 years. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a connection he didn't ask for and didn't know how to stop. But the clock was ticking. He knew he couldn't keep this going forever. The longer he stayed, the messier it would get. The riskier. And yet, the idea of vanishing felt heavier than any payday. Because Margaret didn't just give him money. She gave him something far more dangerous. A glimpse of what it felt like to be loved. The change was slow, barely noticeable at first. Margaret began turning down calls from her daughter. Not because she didn't care, but because those conversations felt distant. Surface level. Her daughter always seemed rushed, distracted, eager to hang up. But Danny? Danny made time. Danny listened. Danny saw her. So, when her daughter asked why she hadn't visited in months, Margaret simply said, "I've been busy." Busy falling in love. It wasn't that she wanted to push anyone away. It just happened. The more she gave to Danny, the less room there was for anyone else. Friends from church would invite her out for lunch, but she'd decline. Old neighbors would knock on her door and she'd pretend to nap. She wanted to protect this fragile new world she had found, a world where someone waited for her messages, smiled at her stories, and thanked her just for being there. It was intoxicating. Every beep of her phone lit up her heart. Every "good morning, sweetheart" from Danny gave her a reason to get out of bed. She had her routine now: warm tea, soft music, and a day built around when he was likely to message her. She didn't notice how much she was shrinking her world just to fit him in. Lucas noticed, though. He could see her activity shrinking, less interaction on social media, fewer comments from her daughter on posts. It was working. She was isolated. Dependent. All by design. He told himself this was a good thing. But then she said something that made his fingers freeze over the keyboard. "You know, I haven't felt this close to anyone since James died. Sometimes I forget that you're not really here." Lucas stared at that message for a long time. Not because it was suspicious, but because it was real. It was raw. She wasn't just playing along, she had given herself over to this connection entirely. Fully. Without question. And he had built that illusion. Margaret started writing emails she never sent, poems she never posted. She imagined what it would be like if he moved in. What dinner might be like. What it would feel like to hold his hand while they watched TV. She even looked up local walking trails and thought about which ones had wheelchair access, just in case his knees were as bad as he said they were. She was planning a future with a man who didn't exist. But in her heart, he was already real. One night, her daughter showed up unexpectedly. Margaret panicked. She shut her laptop, tucked her phone away. They sat awkwardly at the kitchen table while the TV murmured in the background. "Are you okay, Mom?" her daughter asked. "I'm fine," Margaret replied, too quickly. "You haven't been replying to my messages." "I've just been busy." "With who?" Margaret hesitated. She wanted to tell her. She wanted to say his name. But she knew what would follow. The eye roll. The concern. The lecture. The questions. The disbelief. So she said, "It's nothing. Just someone from my veterans group. He checks in sometimes." Her daughter looked unconvinced but didn't push further. They sat in silence. Margaret tapped her fingers on her coffee mug, waiting for her phone to light up again. After her daughter left, she messaged Danny immediately. "Missed you today." And just like that, the hollow faded. She didn't realize it yet, but the walls around her were closing in. The more she gave to Danny, the more disconnected she became from the world that had always been there. She had stopped going to church. Stopped replying to group texts. Stopped answering the door. Because Danny had become her anchor. What Margaret didn't know was that Lucas had seen it all before. Isolation wasn't an accident. It was a tactic. It made things easier. Cleaner. When a victim has no one to turn to, they don't ask the hard questions. They don't doubt. They trust you. They need you. And that made them easy to break. But for the first time, Lucas wasn't sure who was more trapped. The woman who had given her whole heart to a lie. Or the man who built that lie and couldn't seem to walk away. It all led to this moment. Lucas sat at his desk, eyes locked on the screen, cursor blinking over the message he was about to send. The final ask. The big one. He told himself it was just business. That this was how it always ended. The message was perfectly worded, urgent, emotional, believable. He told Margaret that a rare investment opportunity had come up, one that would secure his grandson's future. A military tech startup, he said. He was going in with some old Navy friends but needed a quick transfer to secure his share. Time sensitive. Confidential. Just a temporary loan. She didn't question it. Not once. She asked how much. Lucas hesitated. Then he typed in the number. It was more than anything he'd asked for before. Enough to wipe her account. Enough to end the game. Margaret's reply came minutes later. "Of course, sweetheart. I trust you." That trust, so casually offered, punched him in the gut. But he didn't stop. He sent the fake link. She clicked it. Her computer froze for a second. Then the screen flickered. Just like that, Lucas had access. He watched the data pour in: bank login, passwords, ID scans. He opened her files, one after another. It was all there. Clean. Vulnerable. Unprotected. He could practically hear the money moving. But in the background, Margaret was still typing. She sent another message. "I just want you to know, no matter what happens, you made me feel loved again. That means more than anything." Lucas blinked. His hand hovered over the keyboard, then dropped to his lap. What had he done? She was sitting in her living room right now, probably sipping tea, humming along to that old jazz playlist she'd sent him. Her eyes filled with hope for a life he made up. A future that would never happen. He looked at the screen again. Her bank account was draining. Line by line. Dollar by dollar. It wasn't just money. It was everything she had left. Her safety net. Her sense of dignity. The last thread connecting her to the belief that the world could still be kind. And he had just cut it. Lucas sat back in his chair. The room suddenly felt too quiet. Too still. The monitor still glowed. The money was still moving. But all he could see was Margaret's final message. "You made me feel loved again." And in that moment, for the first time, Lucas wasn't sure he could live with what he'd taken. Lucas stared at the files he had stolen, his hands cold despite the summer heat leaking through the cracked window. He hadn't planned to open them. Usually, once the money came through, he wiped the system clean, deleted the profile, and moved on. No closure. No second thoughts. But something made him pause. Margaret had trusted him with everything. Her heart. Her history. Her digital life. So when he clicked open a folder labeled James, he didn't expect what he found to shatter him. The first file was a letter. Dated a few weeks ago. "To my late husband, thank you for sending Danny." Lucas's throat tightened. She wrote about how she had been ready to give up. How the loneliness had become unbearable. How, one night, she asked James, her late husband, for a sign. A reason to stay. And then Danny appeared. He kept reading. Page after page, Margaret poured her soul into words she never intended anyone else to see. Letters to James. Memories of their life together. Her fears. Her nightly prayers. Her deepest regrets. How she missed the way he used to rub her back when her pain flared up. How she wished he could see her now, smiling again. Laughing again. Because of Danny. Lucas could barely breathe. Another file, her medical notes. Diagnoses he had pretended to understand. Chronic pain. PTSD. Hearing loss from her time in the service. She'd been fighting battles long before he ever typed her name. Then he opened a video. It was Margaret, sitting in her kitchen, looking into the camera. "If anything ever happens to me," she said softly, "I just want to leave a thank you. To Danny. For reminding me I'm still alive. That I still matter." Lucas slammed the laptop shut. It was too much. This wasn't just another job. This wasn't just some faceless mark. He had entered her life like a lifeline. And now he was the very thing that might break her. He sat in the dark, head in his hands, haunted by a woman he'd never met but who, somehow, had made him feel more seen than anyone ever had. All the money in the world couldn't cover the cost of what he had just stolen. He had taken more than dollars. He had taken hope. And now he had to decide if he could live with that. Because some lies only ruin trust. But this one? It had destroyed something far deeper. And Lucas knew, he might never be able to fix it. Lucas didn't sleep that night. The echo of Margaret's voice played on loop in his head, soft, sincere, full of a gratitude he didn't deserve. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face from that video, the fragile smile, the way her hand trembled as she spoke to a man who didn't even exist. He had crossed the line. The money was his. The scam was complete. And yet, he felt more lost than ever. By morning, Lucas sat motionless at his desk, staring at the open wallet filled with her drained savings. All those zeros. And not a single one could silence the weight sitting on his chest. He opened the laptop. For the first time in his short, messy life, Lucas did something no script, no playbook, no mentor in his world had ever taught him. He gave it back. Every cent. He rerouted the funds, bouncing through crypto networks until they found their way back to her account, anonymous, untraceable. Like he had never touched it. He left no note. No confession. Just a single message, sent from Daniel's account before he deleted it for good. "You deserve someone real. I'm sorry. Then he wiped the entire profile clean, photos, chats, everything. Margaret would never hear from Danny again. And that was the kindest thing Lucas could do. Back in Arizona, Margaret sat at her table, waiting for a reply that never came. 1 hour passed. Then 2. Then a day. No message. No good morning, sweetheart. No thinking of you. She sent a few follow-ups. Nothing in return. At first, she assumed something had happened, maybe he was sick, maybe his phone had died. But deep down, a quiet panic began to rise. Not just confusion, but heartbreak. Abandonment. Again. A few days later, she opened her bank account to pay a bill and blinked. The money was there. All of it. No explanation. No signature. Just restored, like nothing had happened. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Then she sat back in her chair, hands in her lap, and whispered to herself, "You were never really here, were you?" The tears came slowly. Not from betrayal. From grief. Still, she didn't report anything. Didn't call the bank. She just closed the laptop and looked out the window, the sunlight stretching across her small garden. And later that day, for the first time in weeks, she called her daughter. Maybe she didn't need Danny to feel alive. Maybe the ache would linger. But at least now, she knew she could stand on her own again. And Lucas, wherever he was, finally understood the price of what he'd done. Not in dollars, but in the weight of a woman's trust. And the silence that followed its loss. Sometimes, the biggest theft isn't money. It's trust. It's hope. It's the quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, someone out there still sees you. Margaret gave everything to a man who never existed. Not because she was naive, but because she was kind. She wasn't foolish, she was human. She wanted to feel love again. To feel visible in a world that had slowly blurred her into the background. And Lucas? He was just another lost soul chasing quick cash, masking his emptiness behind a screen. Until he met her. Until he saw what he was actually stealing. And by then, the damage was done. But this story isn't just about Margaret and Lucas. It's about all the people we scroll past. The ones who live alone. Who answer unknown calls because it might be anyone wanting to talk. It's about those who still believe in second chances. In kindness. In connection. Right now, someone like Margaret is being targeted. Right now, someone like Lucas is being paid to deceive. And unless we speak up, unless we protect each other, these stories won't stop. So here's the truth. No one is too smart to be scammed. No one is too old to want love. And no one deserves to be left in silence after giving someone their trust. If this story moved you, share it. Talk to your parents. Your grandparents. Your neighbors. Let them know they're not invisible. Let them know they're not alone. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is simply remind someone they still matter.